All right, good evening, everybody. This is a Smoke Pit with Sergeant T, and this evening I have a very special guest. It's a psych nurse, actually, from the VA. Would you like to introduce yourself, Sheryl?
Yes, I'm Sheryl Larson. I'm a registered nurse, an RN for 20 years. I have a national certification in psychiatric and mental health nursing and a pair of master's degrees just for the fun of it.
Wow.
Worked for the VA. Well, actually, I'll say first. I actually started psych nursing 10 years ago now, working at the prison in Monroe, the state prison. That is actually the largest mental health treatment facilities in the state of Washington are the prisons.
Wow.
And went from there to the VA and spent some time working with veterans. So I have some insights today about PTSD and veterans specifically.
Well, there's always plenty of room for information about that. That's definitely a big factor in the community. I believe, even though it is relative a term as normal is, we had discussed earlier about the subject of normal before, the beforehand, growing up, the normal state of the human psyche.
And start from that very darling little boy that you have.
Mm-hmm.
He's born, he's got a pair of parents who love him dearly, and he absolutely knows it. And he knows that he is the apple of everyone's eye. You can see him flirt with every man or woman who comes around him. He knows he can because he knows he's safe. And he has a basic assumption about the world. He assumes that all human beings are kind and wonderful. Do you see this in him?
Yeah, I have noticed he's pretty brave. He's pretty social, and he's definitely a ham when he knows people are watching. He'll big old toothy grins and laughs, and
yes.
He always.
And he knows that's absolutely safe because there is nothing in his world that tells him that there's such a thing as a bad person.
Yes.
That's right and correct at his age. He should feel that way.
It's kind of, yeah.
But
in a way, it's kind of scary though, because you're like, I want him to be able to recognize certain things, and be like, no.
Exactly. And by the time he goes to kindergarten, unfortunately, the world will not have been 100% kind to him, and he'll have started to figure out that some people are not as nice as other people.
Yeah.
That's also normal. By the time he gets all the way up to where he's a teenager, he understands something nuanced. And for most people, it goes kind of like this. Most people are nice. And it's okay to be nice with people, but you gotta kind of keep your eyes open. And when you're meeting a new person, you don't immediately give them the keys to the house or the car.
Right.
You gotta be a little cautious, and you fill them out a little, and then you can decide. But still, most people will be okay.
Right.
That's kind of wordy, but it's.
No, I understand.
Normal for adults.
See, I don't know. Normal for me is always, as far as I can remember, as an adult anyway, is CYA, cover your ass. It's very. I mean, it sounds a little jaded, but you always assume that it's kind of the guilty till proven innocent kind of stance,
Yes, it is. And it's one way that you can kind of get over off of the mid-road of normal and off toward the edge just a little bit. Says that there weren't as many nice people around as there ought to have been, and you didn't learn as much support when you were a child as you might have learned. Now, you like me hung out on military bases, and that does make some sense to me. But being more cautious and more paranoid is just a little bit off, heading a bit toward PTSD. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. It goes with a word called resilience.
Okay.
The other way you can be just a little bit off is if for some reason you begin to think of yourself as the bad person. The rest of the world might be reasonably okay, but I'm out to get mine, and I really don't care. I am not going to be a friendly and cooperative person. So, normal, right down the middle of the road, is most people are probably okay, but, kind of keep your eyes open, especially with new people. The two sides, the two gutters that you can head toward are other people are not okay or I'm not okay. Does that give you a good vision of how that lays out?
Yeah, I definitely.
Normal.
I can see the two different aspects, from one side to the other end of the spectrum.
Yes. It kind of gives you a whole spectrum all the way across. What does it look like? So, in that spectrum, if you're a little off to one side or the other, that's not terribly unusual. But if you're way out to the outsides, then we begin to look to that as something has affected how you feel about the world, how you understand it. Something negative has affected it.
Right.
And for some people, they can have a lot of negative things affect them, and they bounce right back. That's that word resiliency. People learn resiliency from watching their parents struggle and succeed.
Right.
And then starting to try it out for themselves. But the techniques either come from your parents or the people that you're watching most predominantly as a child, or it's a tough gig as an adult to learn. And we'll be coming back to that shortly.
Okay.
Why that really affects PTSD and who ends up with it bad and who's okay.
All right.
Because it's one of those things that you want to know about. We'll play a scenario for a moment. Let's imagine that you and 3 of your good buddies are being sent out on a mission.
Okay.
4 of you are all in one little Jeep. It's armored, but, it's not really, And so you're cruising down the road, and you get hit by an IED.
Okay.
1 of you dies. 3 of you are alive.
All right.
You're all pretty lucky. You're reasonably whole-bodied on this. Will all 3 of you get PTSD?
I'm going to go with no, even though I would think that would definitely have impacted all 3 of them.
It certainly will impact you. But first thing to know about PTSD is you don't have it the day that you get hit with the trauma, or the next day, or the day after that.
Yeah.
Absolutely everybody will have reacted to that trauma.
I can definitely relate to the delayed reaction, because we talked about that, the stuffing the suitcase and things like that earlier. So I definitely understand that it doesn't always happen the day that the trauma happens.
Right. It's like if you lose a loved one, yes, you grieve the first days, but it's not abnormal, ineffective grieving for months. You go through a normal process. And if you didn't go through that normal process and come out the other end, then it's ineffective. Then it's a problem, right? Same thing with PTSD. Everybody experienced the trauma, and everybody struggles. But 3 months later, have you managed to pull yourself back into the mid-road, or are you now off into one of those two ditches that we talked about? Are you now thinking that other people are all bad, or thinking of yourself as bad? Survivor guilt.
Wow. I've never heard it put like that, but it definitely makes sense. That would definitely hits home. Um, even the part where you were talking about, when you lose a loved one, I remember kind of thinking it was odd, at a funerals like at my grandmother's, for instance. Um, I was still kind of numb. I don't think it had sunk in yet, but it seemed like there were a lot of other people who were just instantly tears, and I was kind of wondering if there was what was up with me, because here are all these other people in tears and crying, and I just didn't really seem to have a reaction. Like, I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, and so I was just pretty quiet, and it didn't hit me till like, oh, probably about a month or two, where I was like, whoa, she's gone. That's when it really set in.
She's not coming back, gone.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's overwhelming. And not an uncommon reaction, by the way.
Right.
But if 6 months later you can't get through a day because she's not there, then you know something's gone really awry.
Right.
The same way with PTSD. 3 months later, they can look at it and say some little questions, If you had to go shopping at Walmart on Christmas Eve for something that's really important to your child, you really, really feel like you've got to go to the store and buy that, can you get through Walmart on Christmas Eve without having a physical reaction that makes you have to leave the store?
I myself, dude,
That's a question. Can you be around a crowd and not have it be bad?
It has to be really super important.
Yes. Have you got to where, if you go in a room, do you want the seat in the corner so that you can keep an eye on everybody?
Pretty much.
Those are signs of, you don't assume that everybody's going to be pretty well okay. At this point, you assume that most people are going to be bad, that you better be alert. And to have too many of them around means that you can't possibly watch them all. It's unsafe.
Yeah.
And that's hugely PTSD.
Or that you're not tracking something.
You're over in the gutter believing that all people are bad at a deep level.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that PTSD reaction and what it feels like, how it is internally. So, I said earlier when we were talking that this is my very favorite story to tell. This is the tiger story.
Right.
We're going to talk about how the body feels and processes traditionally, what the human body was set up to do.
Okay.
So, you and I and the rest of the tribe, we're all sitting around. We've just had this delicious meal of roasted gazelle, and we're all laying back and relaxing around the fire. And somebody looks up, and they see a tiger coming over the hill. Now, immediately, we realize the tiger's there, and every one of our bodies has the same reaction. The eye sees it, the brain, the memories trigger, and it doesn't bother to ask the rest of the brain whatsoever. It doesn't go and say, prefrontal lobe, do you think it's logically a good idea that we should prepare to fight or run from this tiger?
Right.
The brain doesn't do that. It just says, holy mackerel, we better do something right now. And so immediately, the memory section of the brain directly sends a message to the adrenal glands and says, turn production up to 100%. We need help immediately. And the adrenal glands do. They start pumping out adrenaline as fast as it'll go.
Yeah, like emergency
and that
mode.
Makes the body do. Yes. It says, we're going to do fight or flight here. We're either going to fight and kill this tiger, or we're going to run from it, or we're not surviving. So we better put our all into this. And so the body does. And a whole bunch of changes happen almost immediately. So, the heart starts pounding fast. The lungs start breathing in and out as deep and fast as they possibly can. But keeping it deep because they want to get a good flow of oxygen going.
Oh, yeah.
Because the heart is pumping that out to every blood vessel out there to get it to all of the muscles, so that the muscles have enough oxygen to burn to be able to do whatever activities needed. That's obvious, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Now, did you know that it also shuts off the blood flow to your stomach? Even though we just ate that gazelle,
Yeah.
we don't need to digest it right now. It can wait until later. If we survive this, then we'll worry about digestion. It's just not priority.
Yeah, I
And
didn't.
so the stomach gets no blood flow.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but it kind of makes sense to that it would be diverting all its energy towards priority functions. If
Exactly. What else can you do?
Yeah.
So you know that butterfly kind of queasy feeling you get in your stomach? That's
Yeah.
why. It's actually physically related. Makes perfect sense. Now, also, the eyes are going to contract. They're going to become pinpoint so that they're really focused on one specific item, and only one item. Because you don't need to know everything else that's going on right now. You need to be focused on what's going on.
Is like tunnel vision?
Yes, and it means that if you're in the middle of a fight or flight reaction, you can't hold up a page and read it.
See,
Your eyes don't focus that way.
I never really thought about it. That would be. I mean, it would kind of make sense, but I didn't know that it was that to that extent where. I wouldn't have thought about it. If somebody held this up in front of me right now, I wouldn't be able to read it for nothing. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yes, because you're not thinking in those terms. Your logic center in your brain has no control. It's along for the ride. That's another of the changes that have gone on. So you think about it, the body and what it's set up for when it's laying there relaxed, just had a nice meal, everything's fine. By the way, they call it in science terms, feed or breed, that state of mind.
Yeah.
And then you switch it to fight or flight. Every system in the body has adjusted, and what the body is capable of has changed entirely.
That's a lot of physiological changes. That's a lot of more physical than they talk about. When you hear PTSD, you hear about a lot of the psyche aspect, but not the chemical and the actual physical things that occur.
And it's important to remember that our brain really is part of our body. Weirdly enough, all of it is very connected. So That reaction was perfect. When the tiger came over the hill, all of us collectively, we have that reaction, and we go out there and we can kill the tiger, and we've got a lovely new rug for the hearth, right?
Right.
Everything worked. That's why human beings are such a successful species. We can pull that off and get through it and live against a much greater predator.
True.
But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in nowadays. Nowadays, stress and danger frequently isn't actually physical. It tends to be much more mental. And so all of that adrenaline doesn't necessarily help us, especially when we have PTSD. Because you remember that little voice in memory that said, adrenal glands, turn the volume up and let's run these 100%?
Right. That's when you feel that.
Got a message.
When you feel that in
they never got a message to turn it down.
Yeah, when you feel it in your legs, that shot go through your quads, you're like, you get shaky.
Yes. And so, out there right now are Vietnam veterans who have spent half a century almost having an adrenaline flow that's running probably 60 to 75% all the time. And it really takes a toll on their body.
Yeah.
Because their heart is working too hard and their muscles are always tight and sore, and their logic center in their brain has trouble keeping contact with the rest of the body, and the long list of things that are actually very difficult.
Right. It's a piece I want to do later on addiction, but I found it a lot. Addiction, chemical dependency and stuff seems to tie in a lot to PTSD, because a lot of, even fellow, especially fellow veterans that I've known, or, that were seeking treatment, were, had their battles with chemical dependency as well. And when you were talking about that adrenaline, that constantly being on hyperdrive, I was talking with a shipmate of mine, that I'd served with a while back in the past, and we had reconnected and we're talking, and we had talked about some of our different struggles, and I had kind of hit the skids and fallen on my face a little bit with some things, and he was saying that it seems common, and we came to our own theory that it's because you're so used to having that stress level, or that shot of adrenaline, that hyper drive, that when it's not there, you seek it from other places, and unfortunately, chemicals are there for that instant bam. There it is. There's that intensity. There's that hyper. Is there? Do you feel there's a connection with that? Like,
and it works both ways. So, if you find yourself down and struggling, and you drink alcohol, it brings you back and gives you back that adrenaline rush, and you feel more normal. But then you also feel tired and stressed again. And so then you drink more, and you find yourself passing out, and you again have managed to be relaxed, right?
Yeah, you go from you get that strung out. Once it goes away, you're in even worse off. Yeah.
And then it's time for more.
Yep.
And then maybe you discover that marijuana is a little bit different. Cannabis, as they call it in our region here.
Yeah.
And you try that, and you find out that, hey, there's some that makes you feel up, and that feels more normal, and there's some that lets you be relaxed, and that feels relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
Good combination, right?
Right.
But always, it's a stopgap measure, and it leaves you reliant on the substances to try and find any level of normal.
Yeah.
And so it would be lovely,
Especially if
you're, you can find a cure.
Especially if you're a creature of habit anyway, or you've kind of become a creature of habit, that would be definitely a mechanism for like, okay, this is what I do every day. This is what makes it normal right now. It's usually about this time, so I could see that definitely being a big factor.
Yes, but it would be lovely if alcohol, marijuana, anything else was recreational, not something that you have to have just to get through a day. So it would be lovely to find a way to at least dial back the adrenaline and help the thought processes to return to normal. So then we get to the question I asked you earlier. Can PTSD be cured?
No, this is like I said earlier. I'd have to go with no, even though it's frustrating when you're trying to get it on paper. When you're dealing with things like the VA or getting medical treatment for it.
Yes, because the bureaucracies are hugely frustrating, and you'd love to be able to get real treatment. On the other hand, you didn't want them jacking with you and making life much worse because you're doing better. That doesn't seem fair, does it?
No, it doesn't. And unfortunately, it seems to be common.
Yes. As we've talked, we'll do a second show and we'll talk about the VA and why some of that is the way it is. Sometimes the insights help you know how to, it's the old know your enemy feeling.
Right.
So
Definitely.
It's good to know as much as you can, because that's ammunition for your side.
All right.
But despite the fact that there's not quite a cure, now let's talk about the not a cure.
Okay.
We were talking about your dad, and he's a great analogy.
Right.
Is it okay if I talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
So your dad has cancer and has been treated.
Yeah.
Is he cured?
No. It's just they call it remission. That's about the best word you're going to get when it comes to cancer treatments now.
Exactly. Remission means the disease process isn't active, it isn't affecting your daily life, and it isn't going to kill you at this point. But we don't want to assume that things are back to the way they'd have been if you never had cancer.
Right.
Instead, a lot of things did shift, and so we have to look at it different from now on. And that's not always the bad news.
No,
It sure
but
seems like cancer's bad news.
yeah, it does. Even when his went into remission, when he had beat it the first time, it still changed his lifestyle. He still had to alter diets. He still had to change, his whole, his whole way of life kind of changed in a way. Even when it came to doing physical things, because now he's down to just the one kidney left, so he has to not only watch his diet, but watch how much stress he puts on the body and things like that. So
Yes, but having cancer and treatment also changed him in ways that turned out to be positive, ironically. It helped him learn to communicate and interact in ways that he hadn't understood before. In some ways, it's been a blessing for you and your relationship.
yeah, I can say
and
that.
it's weird
Yeah,
But
it's the silver
the
lining.
truth is, yes, the truth is a disease process that fundamental will definitely change everything in a person's life. And it's true of PTSD, and it's true of PTSD treatment, that it will change you, but it will never return you to what you'd have been if it didn't happen. That cure, that you're back to normal, never really happens. But it might be that what becomes normal is better than whatever was a possibility.
Yeah, see,
So,
that would be cool if that was actually more of a point or something that they would use when it's first addressed, like when a person is first going and seeking help from an agency about something like PTSD. A lot of times, when you first read about it or when it's first explained to them, it's a lot of the negative, of course, the negative impact. So immediately,
right.
immediately it goes into this oh shit kind of feeling. So
This is bad. My life is over.
so
And that, interestingly,
regardless,
is one of the keys
yeah.
of PTSD. Did you know this? I'd forgotten to say this. People who suffer from PTSD usually assume that their life will be short from here on.
Yeah, I didn't, now that you mention it, that makes sense. But it's just it definitely doesn't do a lot for morale. That's for sure. When you're still trying to figure out what's going on and why everything's going wrong, and then you get bombarded with okay, well, this all these different treatments. It's a lot of information to take in at one time, especially in a field that's still kind of being felt out and researched.
Yes, exactly. So it makes it hard to really embrace treatment. But treatment tends to be really successful. I was trying to remember what the most recent statistics were, but it's running in the 60+% of people who go through a complete course of PTSD treatment will come out the other side in remission, basically. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If sometimes I wish they could kind of incorporate that kind of attitude a little bit more in the information in a way. Um, that way it doesn't just feel like, oh great, here's something more I can add to the to-do list or the plate. It's just kind of that
Really, I'm overwhelmed and you want me to do what?
yeah, so I wonder if kind of expanding on that kind of attitude, I guess you'd call it, or at least putting that part of the information out there along, initially, if that would kind of, help take some of the weight off of it, I guess you could say.
I think so. I think it would be big. So, what does PTSD treatment look like? I said earlier this is alphabet soup, and it's like this. You can have PE or EMDR, or you can go with CBT, which is a specific treatment based on CBT. And that's definitely nothing but alphabet soup, right?
Yeah, like if like I can tell you right now, if I went in there and they threw all that at me, I would be like, whatever, dude. I would just.
Really, this is obviously not designed to be understandable.
Yeah.
So let's look at them, because each one of them is quite different. First one is PE, prolonged exposure. Prolonged exposure is that you're going to normalize that trauma let it no longer be way important as far as your memory part of your brain is concerned. We're going to wear out the path to it until it's no longer fun and exciting. Because what people do is they say, I'm not thinking about that trauma again. And then, of course, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're waking up screaming from a dream of said trauma.
Right.
Brain says, if we have to keep avoiding it, we're going to keep shoving it back at you. And it never normalizes and goes away. So think about that like this process. You're driving down the road and somebody in front of you does something really stupid and you manage to miss them by like a fraction of an inch. And 10 minutes later, your heart is still pounding like 180 beats a minute, right?
Yeah.
And you're still like white knuckling the steering wheel and just hoping that you make it home safe.
Yeah.
But the next day, it's gone away.
Yeah.
You don't keep dwelling it over and over. You kind of talk it out. You tell it to all your friends. You write about it on Facebook. You complain to the police, whatever it is that you do. But you talk about it several times, and then it's gone. Right?
Yeah, you're right. So that's prolonged. That's
prolonged exposure.
Prolonged exposure. Is that how do they get? What do they mean by prolonged exposure? Is that like? I know you covered that. You know, it's.
So it looks like this, for example. You go in and you see your therapist. PE is always one-on-one, never a group session. You go in and you start talking about your trauma. And you tell the whole story all the way through.
Okay.
And the first time that's like torture, right?
Yeah. Okay. I understand I understand where it's going now. Okay. It's just when we were talking
and then
about.
You come back next week and you tell your story, and the week after, and you tell your story, and the week after, and you tell your story, until it gets to where it's no longer that emotional. You've done it over and over, and now it's just routine. It's just a story.
See, now I wonder now, because I used to get so frustrated, you know, back when, you know, things were a little worse off and, you know, things were kind of a mess. I used to get so frustrated when I would go to the VA or, you know, a facility somewhere and you're trying to get help because, you know, you're kind of a mess and you don't know what's wrong, but you know it ain't right, you know, and they keep asking you the same thing, and you go through the story, right? You're thinking, okay, well, this person's going to help me out, you know? And then you're like, okay, so what now, doc? And then like, oh, I'm not the doctor. I'm just, you know, the nurse, or I'm just this. And so they write you a thing, and they refer you down the hallway, and you're like, oh, okay, so that's the guy I got to talk to. Oh, yeah, you know, and then you go and you repeat your story, and you tell him, and you tell, you know, and so... but it didn't seem like things were moving. But you know, they're asking you the same thing, and you're telling them the story, you know, and it was so frustrating, and I was starting.
You have the steps.
And I was starting.
It was frustrating. It was not therapeutic for you, right?
Right, and you start. Then comes
so
then comes the paranoia, though. Then comes the paranoia. Like, are they just asking me to repeat myself? So that they're hoping that I trip and change my story or something, so that they can screw with me, you know. So now you're not only frustrated, but you're paranoid too, you know.
So that's subtly but fundamentally different from what they do actually in PE. What they do in PE is you have one trusted counselor, the same person, and
right.
You talk this all out in advance, and you say, okay. Now we're going to go back through. Let's go through the story.
Right.
And eventually it'll be a next exercise, by the way. Now we're going to go out and we're going to expose ourselves to a crowd. And you very carefully choose a safest, here's a way to introduce myself to it. You come back and you talk through that story and how did it feel. And what about this point? So it's a very extensive therapy. Takes a long time to get to where it all normalizes.
Right.
But I will say that people who stay the course of it do tend to get better quite a lot.
Yeah.
I also see that 6 months or 8 months later, frequently they need to come back and go back through their story and again normalize it. It'll tend to revert, and then you've got to kick it again and get it back in line.
Yeah, I would have to totally agree.
So that's PE. An interesting theory, and I've seen it work for people who have very severe cases.
See, I think I would have benefited from that the most if I would have gotten that right away, instead of having to go through this chain of trying to get referred and trying to figure out who to see and what's if I think that would have been something good information to know about in the very beginning when it first was really hitting me.
Yes. And that's why we'll talk extensively about the VA and the system, because there's reasons they haven't offered it that way, but yes, it would have been better. It would have helped you more if that had been early on in the process. Makes me think about your conversation with the Master Sergeant. You're talking about the process of being mustered out and how that all goes together, and that it's not functional. It doesn't lead you to the appropriate places at the right time.
Right. I remember that was with Senior Chief Santoni, and we were discussing.
Yes.
We were discussing the process, the expedition, the exit process from the military, and ways that could be better streamlined. Yeah, I remember.
Yes. So let's talk about the next way you can get treatment. The next one is called EMDR. Eye movement, rapid. I can't remember. Sorry about the alphabet soup on it.
No, I remember hearing something about it with the eyes.
Yes. Something about, and I haven't seen this one, so this one I don't have personal experience with, but there's a machine that causes your eye to move rapidly in certain patterns, and they say that it reprograms the brain. And so they literally will be talking to you about your trauma and having you have your eyes move certain ways, and your brain learns to reinterpret it differently because of it.
So, okay, it makes a little more sense hearing it that way. That's a little more specific than the last couple of descriptions that I had. Because it sounds kind of hokey at first when it's first explained to you. You're like, yeah, I'm making my eyes move around. I don't see how that's going to help with what I'm going through right now. So it's good to have that kind of a more specific, like, okay, that's why we do that. Instead of just, okay, this is what we do, and supposedly you get better. Yeah.
Yes, which sounds more like Harry Potter stuff.
Yeah.
But it is the most controversial among professionals of the three treatments. Now, the third one is cognitive processing therapy. They're going to teach you new ways to think. And I suspect that you had classes on this because of where you were receiving treatment.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect you were actually in CPT, whether you knew it or not.
Yeah.
So they start out with, we're not going to talk about your trauma at all. this is fun to me because these treatments can be direct opposites of each other. Prolonged exposure, you're going to talk about it extensively, but in CPT, you're not going to actually say it whatsoever. In PE, you're going to be one-on-one with a therapist.
Right.
But if you're getting really good cognitive processing therapy, you need to be in a group. It doesn't work well one-on-one. You have to be bouncing thoughts and ideas off of each other.
Yeah, in fact, there was a few sessions, like classes, that we went to that were specifically about that. Now that you mention it, it kind of brings back, the good memory. In fact, when I was discussing earlier about, if I could pick a point in life where things had started, to where I actually found a direction out of the woods, at least. That was one of the big things I remember that were a big tool to have, if it makes sense.
Yes, quite. And so you start learning these skills of how do you evaluate your own thought processes? How do you evaluate information that's coming in and what really happened and whether this is reality? And you find yourself looking for fallacies. Now, was that a good information source? Was what they said logical? Does it follow through appropriately? Does it match what I understand of the world? How do I think about this normally? And how are they trying to make me think about it? Did you get those classes in how to reevaluate what your brain is interpreting?
Yeah, it's a little foggy. It's been some time, but I do believe I remember bits and pieces about discussing better ways to react when this happens. Very common situations that normally can be interpreted as triggers, and
Yes.
so they would kind of reenact it a little bit, and they would ask somebody, how do you feel, or how did you react, and they would say, they would give theirs, and then they would move on to another person and be like, now how could they have done this different, or what would have been a more productive way to do that, to go about solving that situation.
Yes. And they actually will end up with a statement about a situation that here's what your thought process, what your gestalt of the world was when you came into the situation, and it's why you took the course you took.
Yeah.
But now that you've evaluated it, what do you think is reality of the world? And it tends to be in 5 different areas, and I never ever come up with all 5, so I apologize. But it'll be in relationships, or in your understanding of whether people are good or bad, in personal safety stuff, those type of very important to human life areas.
Right.
And what they're looking to do over the course of 3 months is retrain your brain to be back in the center of that spectrum, back in the middle of the road instead of off in the gutter. To see people as, well, probably they're okay. I'll be cautious, but I don't have to be paranoid about it.
Right.
As an example.
Which is totally goes against everything that's burned into your head. If you're coming out of, any kind of high-speed unit in the military,
Exactly.
Because, therefore,
you are precisely right.
You go from, you better be watchful of everything and pay attention to detail, and it's always better to have your guard up than to let it down and get bit in the butt. So to have
Yes.
a therapy based on the total opposite end of that spectrum, I imagine can seem pretty daunting to somebody that's been programmed a certain way for so long.
And if worse yet, it's now more than 4 decades later and you've been keeping that thought process, it's pretty tough to shift it, even if you were able to decide that you wanted to make that change. It's a rough one.
Yeah, it is.
But as a trained therapist in this starts talking this through with the group, there's some things that you start to think about. So, you know these guys who are hypervigilant, and they've had PTSD for more than 40 years, and they've been hypervigilant for more than 40 years.
Yeah, I think I know a few.
They don't even yeah, they don't hardly even sleep, right?
Yeah, my dad be one of them.
Yes. Now, yes, he has a high adrenaline flow, and yes, he wants to be hypervigilant, and he follows a whole bunch of habits in order to make that so. But realistically, are you hypervigilant for 50 years?
Yeah, that's hard to say because I remember as a kid, even if my dad fell asleep on the couch, right, and you know he needed to be woke up. I remember my mom, she would go, well, go wake your dad up, and every time that I would poke him or try to even just kind of, hey, Dad, he would jump up or he would sit straight up like Dracula, and I would have to duck sometimes, and I was so. After a while, I was like, "No, Mom, you go wake him up."
Yes, I remember that from both my dad and my brother. Very tough.
Yeah.
But still, their brain had to turn off at some point.
Yeah.
You by yourself, you can't possibly be vigilant all the time.
No.
And
it's exhausting.
If worse
really.
Yet, if you're exhausted, you're deprived of sleep, and you're using alcohol or drugs in order to help try to get past some of that, your brain may have the adrenaline turned up at 100%, but you aren't really adding to your safety in it.
Yeah.
So hypervigilance doesn't buy you much.
It's exhausting, but it's still. I can understand, from experience that it's one of those things that's, depending on a situation, is really hard to just stop,
Exactly. And that's why the therapy piece from somebody who actually understands PTSD and can actually walk through all of the reasons why you can do this a little bit different and help your brain accept that it doesn't have to be the PTSD brain. That's huge. Now, let me ask you this. Do medications help?
At first, I'm not going to lie, I thought going in a lot of it was BS. Because it just seemed like the go-to thing, and they were so willing to just, oh, here, take this, but if you stop taking it, it's really gonna fuck you up, and you're like, what, and so you kind of, it's easy to get paranoid, suspicious, maybe even a little combative about the subject, so. But after a while, I have to admit, in fact, I'm on a few now that really do seem to help. They do seem to have a positive impact, and they have kind of improved, things in my day-to-day life. So, all in all, I would have to say it's a mixed bag. I would have to say, it's got definitely. I would have to say they do help, but there are pitfalls if you're not careful, like really careful
Yes, I think all of that is absolutely true. So here's some things that are said by patients and experts. First, a young man that I knew in prison, he was kind of retarded, and I think this is the most brilliant statement I had ever heard from somebody. And so I always think about that, even an idiot becomes a savant given the appropriate experiences. So this is what my young friend Davy Jones tells us.
Okay.
He says, when it comes to psych medications, even the side effect medications have side effects. And he's right.
Yeah. That's frustrating. I know what it was for me. It was like trying to plug a dike. It's like, okay, you plug this leak and then another one springs because you plugged that one, and then you're like,
exactly.
Well, here, take this. You plug that one, and then now that you plug that one, the pressure's built up at another one, and it pops.
But now that you've fixed that problem, now you have dry mouth. Well, try some of this gel; it might help.
Yeah.
Yeah. It goes on and on and on. So it's something to keep in mind about medications. And here's what the experts actually say. They say medications are great because they give you a window of opportunity. And that opens you up to therapy. So a basic piece, if you go and see somebody and they want to give you medications and they say it'll make it all better, go see someone else. But if you get on medications and that's the window into going to therapy, that's probably a good route forward.
I never heard it explained that way. Is there which route would you say is the best bet? I mean, if you're confronted with an option like that, like, okay, do I go with this one who was just like, here's a prescription ready and waiting, or do I go with this one who says that, the other guy's, not practicing right?
So what you want is, you want a psychiatrist who's going to spend a little time and make sure that you understand what your options are and why they feel like these would be a better option for you than those. That's hugely important. And you want somebody who's not going to say, well, you take the pills and you'll be fine. You want someone who says, the pills are okay, they'll help you, but you really need therapy. Let's get you into therapy that'll help you long term instead of a pill that works for hours.
See, and that makes total sense to me. In fact, I was just talking about that with you before we started recording. A prescriber I talked to earlier, that he's one of the best I've had, because normally I haven't had really much good to say about him, but this one actually seems to be, we seem to have a good rapport. And I think a lot of that was because of exactly what you just mentioned. He actually seemed a little concerned. He seemed more of a person, and he didn't just here, take these. He would explain, okay, this is what the options are, but given what you've explained to me and what's going on in your life, I think this would be the best option for you. And what really impressed me was you get group therapy pushed at you a lot, when going through treatments and stuff for mental health, and a lot of times the symptoms are kind of antisocial symptoms, like you don't want to be in a big group, let alone sharing feels with them. And
boy, that sounds good. I want to go hang out with other people who are having the same problem.
Yeah. So
I don't want to have the problem. problem. Why would I want to be around somebody else who has?
Right, but when I would go to my QTC appointments, when I was filing claims and stuff, that was a big thing they brought up was group therapy. So after a while, I was like, all right, I'll give this a shot. And the next time I saw this prescriber, I was like, hey, what about group therapy? Do you think And he was actually very honest and upfront about it and said, I don't think that's the best option for you with these symptoms that you have. He's like, I think that would kind of be counterproductive. And I was like,
yep.
Wow, I respect that because, it seems like a lot of times you go into a medical facility or a mental health facility, they whatever you bring up, they're like, "Oh yeah, great!" They jump on it. It's almost like going up to a salesperson and telling him that you want to pay more for a car. Yeah. So,
yeah, exactly.
So that really hits home kind of with what you said about what you should want to hear from seeking help with a prescriber.
And that brings us inevitably to the VA. For several reasons, but one big reason is if you want PTSD treatment, the biggest setting in the United States is the VA. And it's hard to find therapists outside the VA who can do actual PTSD treatment. But we both know the VA can be very frustrating.
Yes.
So, a bigger subject, but we'll talk next time because I've got an easy 30 minutes of comments about the VA and why some of it plays out the way it does. And I think it's information that would be helpful for veterans to understand better.
Definitely. And, I've really enjoyed the conversation we've been having. I believe we've covered quite a bit of ground. We covered from, what the normal or, what it is considered normal state of, the person's, God, I'm stuttering right now. I'm sorry. Yes, exactly. And even how it relates to chemical reactions and